Welcome to the Indie Author Showcase, the podcast by indie authors for indie authors. I am your host, now 7-time award-winning author, Chad Robert Morgan. And let's get right into it. First of all, Season 3. New year. We're going to try to get the podcast a little bit more polished. We got a couple plans for some really nice interviews and a couple of on-site stuff, so I'm really optimistic that stuff's going to work out and we can start bringing this podcast up to a new level of professionalism and quality. Not exactly there yet, as you can see. We're working on it little by little. As I've mentioned in the podcast many a times, I got a full-time day job. I am also a writer. I work on my art that goes with our books that we showcase and try to sell at conventions. And on top of that, I am now spending most of my nights and weekends driving Uber because this economy sucks. I have a family that can't stay out of the damn hospital, including myself. I got like $600 in medical bills just for me that I still have to pay. So my time is not my own, but I am still dedicated to doing this podcast. I will still strive to hit a weekly episode. I cannot promise I'm going to hit a weekly episode, but I am going to try. With that said, our first convention of the year is going to be the end of this month, January 30th to February 1st in Ontario, California. That is the 5th annual Creep IE Festival. Now, some news about the convention. One is Bruce Campbell was the first headliner to be scheduled. He has dropped out. I'm not sure why. He said he apologized for having to drop out. The other headliners include Cassandra Peterson, aka Elvira's Mistress of the Dark, Robert England, aka Freddy Krueger, and they've added Keith Sutherland, the guy from 24 and one of the original Lost Boys. They have also added Christopher Lloyd, great Scott, Doc Brown himself from Back to the Future. So, huge celebrity list for Creep IE 5. They're really going all out on this. It is a shame that we lost Bruce Campbell, but they are going to more than make up for it. So, every year, or every convention they do this, they do it twice a year. They hand out promo codes, and the vendor whose promo code is used the most gets a free booth the next year. For whatever reason, I never got mine. So, if you want to support some of the other vendors, I know Scott Harper's promo code is Macabre, and Diabolic's promo code is Diabolic. So, feel free to use either of their promo codes. If there's another vendor out there who you want to support and you want to use their promo code, it helps out the vendor that you like the most, because the one who gets the most promo codes gets the next booth, and that's about a $750 savings. So that is a huge boost. Sorry, it's not going to be me. I don't know why the hell that went wrong, but shit happens. So, moving on there. I am really excited about Creep IE. I am restocking the books. I am trying to create new art, which is going a little bit slower than as expected. Partly because, as I mentioned before, I don't have as much free time. I've also been designing and redesigning the prints so they fit together better. So there's that. Getting back onto writing news, because we're supposed to do this. I'm an indie author. We're indie authors. We write. My next book, Intergalactic Space Force 3, still haven't gotten a firm title yet, but it's part 3 of the series, is getting close to getting the rough draft done. I am definitely looking for beta readers. I think it's going to be a little bit shorter than I anticipated, but I just think the premise is kind of running itself out, and there's no sense just making it more than it is. I also don't mind if there's kind of a minimum length I shoot for, but I mean, if the story is told, the story is told, and we're done, right? There's no sense adding a bunch of chaffa to try to pad it out and make a certain length, right? When it's full, it's full. In fact, if anything, that's a criticism I had of the last book, Fear, because I had a couple of other characters that were basically red shirts, right? And I you kill somebody off, you have to care that you killed them off. So I was trying to build them up to be, I was fattening the lambs for slaughter, basically. And a couple of criticisms I had is, you got this extra storyline that you could have just, this little subplot that could have just been cut out and wouldn't have changed the story. And in all fairness, that was true. I wanted it to be more incorporated, and it just didn't quite gel, and I left it in there. And you can judge for yourself. Now, keep in mind, this has already won Best of the Year for audiobook reviewer, so it's already won one award. So I couldn't have done that bad of a job. But that was the one criticism that I got back for that book, was I had that subplot that really did not progress the story that much. And I think that's a fair criticism of the book. If that's the only flaw in the book, then I think I've done pretty well. But I do think it's a legitimate criticism, personally. That's fair. A couple of things I want to try this year, this is sort of my New Year's resolution, is I want to experiment with some of these book promotion things that I see a lot. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, or if you're on Instagram yourself, or on TikTok, or any of the social medias, you're probably, and you're an indie author myself, you're probably being bombarded with ads, try this program or try that program. I made no sales until I used this program. Now I'm a multi-billionaire, yada, 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 kind of thing. I have no idea which of these are BS and which of these are legitimate. My thought is, if I can get a little bit of a budget, and maybe on a monthly basis, I can start experimenting with these. Then I can report here in the podcast, hey, I got success with this. This is a complete scam. I'll waste my money so you don't have to. It's basically what it boils down to. Now, if anybody has tried any of these things and can recommend one, say, hey, I used Zeely and it was great, or it was horrible, let me know. We'll take that into consideration. One of the things I'm going to try to do this year is focus on marketing, because the only thing that I've done that is successful at all is going in person to conventions and pressing the flesh and talking to people, doing things like Creep IE, WonderCon, Monsterpalooza. These conventions have been great. One of the big advantages I have is that I am in Orange County, which is basically the whole LA concrete jungle area, which means there's a huge population to draw from. Last year I did Hot Mare Expo in Fresno, which was a decent horror convention. It's a young one. They're accepting vendor applications now if you want to be part of the third one out there in Fresno this year. I am debating that with the wife, because the wife doesn't want to drive 4 or 5 hours for what is essentially a small event. The problem with Fresno is, compared to LA, it's just not that big. If you are a vendor in the Fresno area, it's a great event for you. But for those that have to drive 4 or 5 hours, get a hotel room, you're adding to the cost. And in order to recoup that, we need bodies. If you have an event and you only have like 500 people show up, as opposed to, say, San Diego Comic-Con where you have 50,000, the chances of you recuperating your costs, let alone making a profit, start to go down. And again, I'm not trying to diss Fresno or I'm not trying to diss the convention. What I'm just simply saying is logistically, if you want a convention and you want it to be successful, you have to get warm bodies through the door. And when you're in LA or San Francisco, there's kind of a push pull there because, on the one hand, you have way more warm bodies you can pull in. The downside is there's way more events that you're competing with. We had that problem with HorrorCon because we went there and it turned out they were the same day as a competing event and they lost. And that sucked from the potential customer pool. You need to get bodies through the door. So, as you can imagine, I focused on conventions here in the LA area because, one, it's cost effective for me to do it because I'm in the LA area, roughly. I'm in Orange County, but close enough. I don't need to buy I don't have to rent a hotel. I can rent a trailer from U-Haul. I can cart things back and forth. If I forget something, I just bring it the next day because I just go home. It's not a big deal, right? It's very cost effective. And there's a huge population center. So even though I'm doing the same conventions over and over again, I'm getting a good mix of returning customers and new customers, right? I am definitely getting people that says, hey, I saw you at Hotmare Expo. I didn't get your book. I want to make sure I get it this time. And I'm getting a lot of people that says, oh, I've not heard of this before. Tell me more about it. So I'm still getting that good mix. So these conventions here in LA are still really worth doing for me. But they're time consuming. They're costly. I am getting to the point where I'm starting to make profits off of these things. More importantly, is I want to make sure that I'm at least breaking even so I can afford to do the next one because otherwise I'm running at a loss and then this just becomes an expensive hobby at that point. Point of all this is that if I want to keep doing the conventions as my primary marketing source, I need to start expanding out. And that's why I have been looking for other conventions outside of the LA area so I can spread my reach out. But in order to do that, they have to be big enough to get enough bodies in the door that I have a chance to recoup that investment. Because again, going to Hotmare Expo as an example, that one we actually broke even. It was not too bad because I got enough bodies through the door, and the cost was low enough because I think they charge like $250 for the booth or something like that. That we still broke even. And again, anything that's expanding our reach, getting us more noticed. I am looking at events in Sacramento. I am looking at events in Phoenix, Texas. Hopefully I can find something that is worthwhile. The other side of that too is I got a lot of family drama going on right now, and that kind of time sink is really, I mean, as I've already mentioned, my hours are tight. So the convention route might not be the best long-term marketing strategy for me. I don't have the hours to put into it, and I need to find ones that are big enough that I can recoup that investment. So that's where this whole let's start experimenting with some of these ads that we've seen and see if any of these work. And I am skeptical that any of them are going to work, to be honest. I think they're all scams, to be honest. But if I try it and I get positive results, I can let you know. If I try it and I get negative results, I can let you know. Either way, you will know. And then you won't have to make the same mistake I did. So you're welcome. But that is going to be kind of like my New Year's resolution for this year. Let's work on that marketing. And to that end, if anybody out there is doing anything, in fact, I'll tell you one other thing. Eric Williford turned me onto this. I have not actually tried it yet, but he's been using it and he's had some success. And he has been marketing his books on Whatnot. I'd love to pick his brain a little more to see how well that's worked, but that's what he's been experimenting with. So we might give that a shot. I know I've talked a little bit with Cynthia Diamond. I'm trying to get her on the show. She announced on TikTok that she lost her day job. So now she is focusing on trying to make writing her full time career. So I want to have discussions with her. I'm trying to get her on the show. She seems really into the idea. Hopefully, we can make that happen. I want to talk to her about her marketing strategies and her plans on increasing her readership. Because now that that's going to be her full time job, you know, she's going to need to do that. So there's definitely a fire lit under her to get that done. So I want to know what avenue she's trying, what works for her, what doesn't work for her, and we can move on with that. And again, just kind of build a library of tactics and agencies and stuff that either work or don't work. So that is my goal for the year: improving the podcast, getting some better episodes, and dealing with marketing. With that said, let's go on to this week's review. This week's review: The Favorite Girl by Monica Arya, or Arya, Arya. So we've talked about this a little bit, that when a book hits the podcast, it's reaching a certain quality bar. And there were times I wasn't sure I was going to put this one on the podcast, to be honest. When I first started, I was actually pretty into it. I'm like, hey, this is a pretty interesting book. As the book went on, I started seeing some issues with the book. When it worked really well. There are some prose that that the writer uses that are very, very strong. One of the quotes in the books is, sometimes it's not the number of tears we shed that measure our pain. Sometimes it's the number of smiles we forge. There were a lot of really kind of inspiring, quotable lines in the book. And then there were times when there were seemingly huge plot holes or some Chekhov's guns that were left unfired. Let's talk a little bit about what the book's about. I know I'll kind of get into the nitty gritty details as much as I can while still being spoiler free. This is a book about a young Indian girl who has been human trafficked to the States, her and her sister, and at about age 16 she escapes, and she's been on the road, living on the streets for about 2 years, just trying to survive. She sees an opportunity to turn her life around. A really high class, expensive family needs a housekeeper kind of thing. And so she applies, and it turns out that she has fallen into a very sadistic, cult like family that basically traffics girls. And it's a lot darker and sicker than I'm making it out to be, because it's not that simple. I mean, these people are sick and warped. Okay, this is not young adult by any stretch of imagination. This does deal with very triggering subjects such as sexual abuse and rape that is, I mean, it's distasteful, right? I mean, this is sort of like um, feminine. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Splatterpunk. It's like feminine splatterpunk because it's basically anything that can go wrong to a woman, short of being disemboweled, is basically happening to her. In fact, several of them were killed and turned into mulch, basically. So I mean, this is a dark book, and there's all these like twists in it, like, oh, this person is really this, or this person turns out to be evil, and that kind of thing. That's where I think the book starts to fall apart a little bit. Not completely, like it starts rocking, like it starts going off the rails, but it stays on the track just long enough to get you to the end. I'll give you an example. There's early on in the book, she's doing this resume to get the job, and she's talking about how she has no identity past a couple of years because when she escaped, she made up her identity to hide. It's mentioned this in the book, right? Something about she didn't. There is no her from 2 years previously. Later, there's a big twist where this one guy uses her nickname that her sister had called her by. She's like, how did he know that? Okay, interesting twist, but the the nickname was sort of an offshoot of her current name, which she reinvented herself 2 years ago. So why would the nickname have anything to do with her current name if she hadn't had that name yet? Or did she get that name when she was first trafficked and the traffickers gave her that name? But then why is she keeping it? Because then the traffickers are going to find her? And wouldn't it have been more of a twist if she is changing her identity that he called her by her real name? So, I mean, I heard that and I just had to cock my head. I was like, did I miss something on this? There's very early on in the book, this woman's killed right in front of the main character, and then she sort of disappears, and then like her replacement, right? I'm the girl. No, you're not. That girl died. You're not her. They never really explain why that happened. There's two times in the book where somebody dies. They pretend the person doesn't exist. Then they hint that they're going to tell her everything. Never really do. And then some other person comes in pretending to be the slain person. And it's like, but I thought that person didn't exist. But that, it's one thing to kill off a person and then, bring in person 2.0. Oh no, it was her the entire time. No, it wasn't. That's a different person. Yeah, no, that's her. You must be confused. Okay, you can't. But then why the intermediate step of pretending the person didn't exist? I mean, and they never really explained why they were doing that. I mean, these are corrupt people that could work with impunity. They're actually bragging that if you don't behave, you're basically fertilizer. So why go through the song and dance of pretending the main character killed this person when this person was killed by other means, and then she disappears and is never mentioned again? Those, I mean, you could see it in situations like that where the train is struggling to stay on the tracks, and then we get past that, and then the book starts going again, and we're back on the track and everything is going, and then we hit another kind of weird inconsistency where the train starts rocking again, and we're like, and again, I could bring up more examples, but I don't want to get spoilery in the book. In the end, the train stayed on the tracks long enough to get us to the end of the book. So that is why we're featuring it on the podcast. But there were definitely some times when I was like, I'm this thing teetered on going on my did not finish list, and I'm glad I stuck with it. There's enough good stuff here that makes it worth the trip, even though there's a few places where I was really getting skeptical that we were going to make it to the end. So, if you are looking for a psychological thriller, especially one focused around women, focused around a female lead and dealing with the fears and traumas that women face, go ahead and give The Favorite Girl a try. If that's the kind of thing that triggers you, you might want to sidestep this book. Just keep in mind that the ride is not quite as smooth as I would have liked. So that's us for the week. I know I'm keeping these things pretty short. I want to keep them tight and concise. We're all busy. You can find us on the TikTok, the Instagram, the Facebook, the Twitter. I am not calling it X. I don't give a shit what they label it. It is not X. Makes it sound like a porn site, although it's pretty much turning into a porn site at this point. You can find us on Blue Sky, YouTube, Spotify, Podbeam, and wherever your podcasts are found. Please like and subscribe. Tune in every week to hear another indie author that you may not have heard of before that might be your new favorite author. See us at Creep IE. Visit us at shopspectralinc.com. There you can find all of our books, including the recent award-winning Fear. You can get your Spectral Ink production merch. You can get your indie author showcase merch. And until then, keep on reading.